All right. Today we welcome a friend of the podcast, dear friend of the podcast, for I believe his fifth appearance on No Limits, the Thriller podcast. Welcome back, Kyle Mills.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good. A fifth. Wow. That's amazing.
5 or 6.
Well, is that the record? Has anybody been on more than me?
I think you got the title. You're the heavyweight champion, I think, right now. So congratulations. I know that's a bigger accomplishment than your pub day and your hardcovers unboxing. We saw you unboxing the hardcovers of Fade In.
Mm-hmm.
How did that feel?
Good. I mean, yeah, it feels done. It feels real at that point. And I don't know why you never get over that sensation. But yeah, it's that's always a good day. And honestly, you never see the cover before that. You see digital mock-ups of it, but then you ask them, well, is it going to be, is it going to be shiny here and matte there and everything? You don't know until you see it. So turned out beautiful. It's a beautiful cover.
Yeah, we just have the advanced reader copy, which is very matte, very, very, very dull in its appearance. I can imagine a hardcover just with a little bit of that gloss, just really popping with those reds and that orange. We're big on covers here on the podcast. So.
I know. Yeah, you rate them, right?
Yeah, and my favorite part about Fade In is the crosshairs. I just think that's a phenomenal touch there on the cover.
Yeah, that looks really good. And it's interesting. I'd sent that to I don't know why I was even sending it to him, but I think he asked my gun consultant, who's a friend of mine, and he's actually also a designer, and he changed the crosshairs on that. So the ones you see, he actually, I think for accuracy and the way that they were done, should be accurate now.
Yeah, and is that Rod? Because I know with the Mitch Rapp series, you were leaning on Rod.
Yeah, he was on, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, good friend of the pod. Yeah, he's one of our patrons. He came on the pod to talk guns and how, the authors incorporate weapons into their books, and some do it better than others. And when you can lean on someone like that, it just shines through, like in this book. Not only traditional weapons, but you've got high-tech, next-generation weapons, which we're going to have to talk about. That's always a part of a Kyle Mills book, is you're always pushing the envelope about what the world's going to look like in 10, 20, 50 years from now. And whether it's your plots trying to guess at that, whether it's the technology that's to come, it feels like you and Brad Thor are competing for who gets the most amount of headlines in their books, and you're a year or two ahead of the curve. You did that here with this one.
It's fun to do. I've gotten used to that over the years. I write books because there are subjects that interest me. I mean, it's it's an excuse to do a deep dive into something that's really interesting to you. And so all that technology that's right around the corner, or maybe is being developed now or even implemented now, but you don't know. I love that stuff. It's sort of like when I first met Tom Clancy, he'd go through, Boeing's, financial statements. They would talk about projects, and he'd figure out what they were doing from all these different places and put it all together. I just love stuff like that.
It is like a puzzle. And someone like you, who's so in tune and well-read and keep up with current events, you could put the puzzle together, it seems, faster than us mere mortals.
Hopefully, it's all I think about all day.
Yeah. And then you get to put it in plots. You get to exercise that creative muscle. So, and speaking of that creative muscle, this is a story that's been lingering. Fade 1, we covered on the podcast a few years ago, but you wrote it. How many years ago was that published now?
It was we had just had its 20th anniversary.
And how much the world has changed. Just 20 years. What was it like to sit with this character? And as everyone who listens to Thriller Pod knows, you were the torchbearer of the Vince Flynn series, writing Mitch Rapp for so long. How did it feel to, in some ways, actually, it literally and figuratively resurrect Fade and come back to it after 2 decades?
It was really fun. And it was interesting in that after writing Mitch for a decade, I guess it was a decade. I mean, I know Mitch Rapp better than any character I ever created, because, you've got a guy who you've known him since he was in college, right? I mean, huge history behind him. I mean, I never had to guess what Mitch Rapp would do or think about something, because, man, that guy is laid out, right? Vince did a great job of it. Then I took him in a little bit of a different direction, but always based on his history. So with Fade, it was really interesting because I wasn't sure, like, after being in Mitch Rapp's head for a decade, could I pick him back up again? And I thought in a few months, I'll be able to figure him out again. And I just took a few days and I was
Mm.
right back like in Fade's head. And he's he's got the same sort of deadly skills set as Mitch Rapp, but from a personality standpoint, he's like the polar opposite.
Yeah. And I feel like, the guardrails came off a little with this one since it was your own universe, your own character, your brainchild. Did you feel maybe a weight lifted off your shoulders, or at least in terms of creativity, did you feel that creative license to play around in this universe? Because this is a very creative book, whether it's traveling, weapons, just bizarre action scenes. Like, it's fitting for Fade to be in some of these situations because they're so unfamiliar to, a normal person, but he's such a different kind of quirky operator and personality. It makes sense for him. I just feel like you could go in so many different directions, where in the Mitch Rapp universe, you already had defined guardrails that you had to kind of stay between. Did you feel you were let
Yeah.
loose on this one?
I mean, guardrails are it's the perfect word for it. So, you would be, the good news is, Mitch like nobody else, his history, everything about him, but you can't, I mean, you can't go too crazy with him, right? He's not going to, as I've said before, he's not going to become a hairdresser. He's not, like there's a certain way that Mitch Rapp is going to behave, and you can grow him like I
Sure,
did over the 10 years,
for
but
sure.
that has to go year by year, plotting just like people change. Right? Yeah. Fade is he's a little bit of an off the wall character. He's facing kind of an off the wall world, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to resurrect him, is because he's a little bit of a pop philosopher. He's obviously a little bit clinically depressed. Maybe has some substance abuse problems, but he's always thinking about, like, he has really interesting observations about the world, about himself, about other people, and is not always, I think one of the things about Mitch Rapp is he is the master of his universe, like he is in control. And Fade can get swept up in things like everybody else, or overwhelmed by things, or he doesn't understand, the craziness of the world or technology or whatever. So he feels a lot like, I think you can have a little bit of empathy for him because we feel that same thing. And then on top of that, the analogy, I really wanted to play with a lot of the military people that I've met that came back from war, who had been there for a very long time, and they come to the United States and it's like, what now? Like, their lives are completely changed. How are they going to fit into it? How are they going to go back into normal society and all these things? And so he comes out of a coma after having been shot by a police sniper. And he's feeling very much all those things of, like, is this still my world? Do I want to be in it? What am I going to do in it? What's my role here? And like, just like a lot of us feel every day. Mitch always knew what his role was.
Right, exactly. Give me somebody to kill, like you wrote in Total Power. Just call me in when
Mhm.
you got somebody to kill. Fade has a little more of that. I would say indifference is almost the perfect word, and probably the same thing a lot of global war on terrorism veterans feel about, like, well, it seems like the terrorists are winning. It's like, what was those 20, 25 years for, and all the sacrifices? You come out with this dark humor, this indifference. You almost kind of want to give up at times. Fade is contemplating death many, many times. He evades it many, many times. And you had to get creative with that. As you mentioned, the end of Fade 1, if I may, he gets shot by a police sniper. And we don't want to give too much here because you need to buy the book. But we are going to do a spoiler section. Kyle, you know our deal. I hope you're okay.
Sure.
We'll
Yeah, yeah.
save the last
Absolutely. Yeah.
20 minutes or so. We'll do it will embargo it. That episode won't come out until post-publication day. Plenty of
Perfect.
spoiler warnings telling the people, pre-order, get your book. But we're going to have to talk about that because you, like I said, resurrected Fade. You brought him back from the dead. Yet the whole time he's still thinking, do I even want to be here on this earth? And he has to run up against a certain elite. And I just feel like this idea of the elites is a very Kyle Mills thing. You put a little bit of it into the Mitch Rapp universe with Nicholas Ward and the
Yeah.
Cooks and this elite ruling class. I feel like this book lets you just go wild and play with your imagination of, what happens when those elites are the worst of the worst? What happens when there are some really good guys there, but they can't exert their will and save humanity, even though they desperately want to? And even a lot of those ones with the right motive, doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. Let me guess, you have very strong opinions on this idea of global elites running the show.
It's such an interesting thing. So part of the background of this is I split my time, but when I'm in the US, I live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is when I moved here as a young rock climber, was just as a little ski town. There were cows wandering around, and it has become the wealthiest county in the United States. This is the rich and shameless, man. They are here. I've gotten to know some of them, and truth be told, some of them are really great people. But man, they're a different level, a lot of them. I went to a party once and that was it was very influential on my thinking, that this guy throws every year, drops like 250 grand on it. And I got to talking to a bunch of young people, the kids of these people. And I thought, oh my God, they're all taller. I'm almost 6 feet tall. They're all taller than me, including the girls. They're brilliant. They're all at like Ivy League. I'm like, what did you do this summer? Well, I built an electrical dam in like Malawi. And I'm like, I was getting drunk, in the back of a pickup truck when I was your age.
Yeah.
And it got to me to really thinking about how much power these kids were going to have when they got older, and how much power their parents have, but that it's this perpetuating like dynasty of families, that they have these brilliant, beautiful, they're all incredibly good looking, like you're just like, wow, this is the master race. And I feel like an idiot just even being here. And so that really got me to thinking about the rise of the elites. And then you have all the technology that now are at their fingertips, which is just terrifying if it got in the hands of the wrong people.
But I guess that begs the question, who are the wrong people? Because
Almost
maybe
everybody.
you can explain to us who John Lowe is, because I feel like if anybody is going to take the bull by the horns and try to control this future of humanity and the future threat, the collision course we're on, basically killing ourselves and our own planet, he would be kind of the elite I would want to gamble with our future on, because he at least seems to have that grounded base. But he even questions himself, saying, is this even a futile endeavor? What am I even doing here? But he's doing it anyway. And that's, how he gets the team together. So we'll talk about that more in the spoilers. But can you just unpack John Lowe and how you crafted this character who seemingly wants to be that guy to do the right thing?
Yeah, he does. So John Lowe's a billionaire who is really heavy in tech, kind of a composite of many people. And he understands that technology is the future, and it's the future of power. And we're in an unprecedented time. I think I'm really cautious about saying that, because horrible things have always happened. And we had the Luddites. They're like, oh, if you build a little machine, it's going to put us out of work. They're burning things. But I mean, if you think about, I don't know, like King Louis or something, the incredibly powerful ruler. But if you're the average dude, right, you're a subsistence farmer, what impact does King Louis have on your life?
Or
Like,
you're
none.
outside of France. He's got his
Yeah.
one kingdom, but
He's
that's
got
all
one
the domain.
and even if you're in the countryside, I mean, what can he do? Like nail a decree to the church door, and you're like, well, I can't read, and off you go, right? But these people control everything we see. They're creating algorithms to addict us to it. They're using AI to craft, they can personally craft an argument to you, right? AI can analyze your profile, everything you've ever said, everything you've ever bought, everything you've ever read or looked at on YouTube, and craft an argument to you. The power they have is absolutely unprecedented and will continue to be. I think it will continue to grow. So who's in charge? I think at one point, Fade says something to the effect that there will always be an apex predator in society. The best you can do is just make sure it's not the hyenas.
Mm,
And that is what Lowe is trying to do he's extremely powerful and technologically savvy. And he knows this is coming and he wants to make sure it's not the hyenas. So, and to create stability, you look at how weirdly unstable the world is becoming now. And this is interesting to play with because the threats aren't what they used to be. They're not individual terrorists. They're not the Soviet Union. What is it that is the next threat? And you almost can't anticipate it because it's so, I don't know, like the only word I can come up with is stupid. Like the threats are stupid. Like
yeah.
Hamas, that may have been the stupidest move in modern history, right? That's like me going into a bar and Mike Tyson is there and slapping him and saying, I want your chair.
Right.
You knew how that was going. I mean, Russia, largest country in the world by landmass, decides what we need is more land. And they're going to go after the Ukrainians who fight like drunk civet cats. Everybody knows this. And so you almost can't anticipate. Like every morning, I think I'm going to wake up to China has attacked Taiwan.
I mean,
And
then
you have 20 million people dead for nothing. They don't need a tiny little island, but don't count them out.
The semiconductors, though. They want the chip manufacturing.
But they'll be gone. It was just like burned out.
You destroy it.
Like it's just not rational. Like the things that are happening are just not rational anymore. And so this guy wants to say, we're going to give these people what they want, power and whatever, and with my technology, and bring them to heel a little bit and see if we can do that. But on the other hand, he also worries about himself because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is he becoming too powerful? And is that a problem? And he talks about this with Fade, where Fade says, well, oh, you're going to take over the world. Well, how's that going for you? And he's like, a little too well at this point. We're not ready for how successful we've been. Right. And that's why he's trying to put together this team, because he knows he needs basically enforcers, because sometimes asking nice doesn't work.
Yep. The carrot and the stick, the carrot sounds great, but you got to carry that big stick as Teddy said, as the man said.
And it's a perfect situation, right? You're just basically like, he's like, let me give you everything you ever wanted.
Unlimited resources. Yeah.
Or your head's going to explode.
Right. Well, and it's interesting about some of these movements being very irrational, these attacks, you can become so indifferent towards all of it. But the thing is, even the most irrational, illogical among it, you can still get the masses on your side. And that's the power. You think in the Roman Empire, that was a speech you give on the steps of a theater, and now the crowd's behind you. They're fickle. You can get them to do anything. We have not learned 2,000 years later about that. The only thing is now you can amplify the message to 8 billion people, reach essentially everyone, and you can inflame opinions.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, the problem. And it's interesting. A huge influence on me has been George Orwell. And one thing I love about his books or his stories is the interplay between the ruling class and their subjects, because it takes two to tango. One guy can't take over the world. That's absolutely impossible. You could rush him and kill him, right? There's to be a large group of people willing to give up their power to that person in order to worship him or whatever, whatever reason they have. They don't want to think so hard because, shit's complicated or whatever. And so that's what I'm playing with here, is that John Lowe realizes that there's a group of people who desire power more than anything. And then there's a group of people who will tend to cede that power and become a downtrodden, but almost like they did it to themselves to some extent. The guy's basically like, I'm going to screw you. And they say, I like that kind of straight talk, right? Whatever.
Well, there's a huge generational gap as well, because that's almost the way the old guard would approach it. And so I think a theme you bring up in the book a lot, and we'll get to it in spoilers again, but there's so much about the young people doing maybe the unpredictable thing or going a certain way that becomes chaos. If there's a theme of this book, you said the word healing before. I think it's healing and chaos, or healing amidst chaos. And that's true for Fade and his recovery. That's true for the world. That's true for a couple of female characters in the book here, which definitely spoilers. I want to ask you about some moves you made, because in the Mitch Rapp series, maybe the best thing, the longest lasting legacy you gave to us was the transformation of Claudia and Anna and bringing them into Mitch's world. So you can write female characters. You can have an arc for female characters. And the same way Fade is very different than Mitch Rapp, we have some females who are way different than any other characters I've ever read. So I want to talk to you about that.
I'm glad to hear you feel that way. I like quirky characters.
Yes, that's the word.
And I love writing women, because I think one of the fun challenges of being an author is to try to write people who are nothing like you. Because it's just an incredible challenge. You're like, what are these people thinking? When a woman's looking at you and you just said something, what's going on in her mind? What's she thinking? And that's writing. I mean, that's empathy. That, like, can you put yourself in somebody else's shoes? And sometimes it's weird. Sometimes it's like you've got to write a serial killer. And so you have to put yourself in that guy's shoes and think, why does he feel justified in killing a bunch of women or whatever? And you have to get into their heads. And it's my favorite thing about writing, because I mean, you'll write about, I remember I wrote an Iranian character in a Mitch Rapp book, and I was just kind of spewing from his point of view, which is super interesting to do. And I remember my editor said, well, you can't write that because you're kind of like scoring points. This guy's scoring points. But I'm like, but that's his point of view about America and the history. And I absolutely love doing that.
Well, that's the number one skill in debate, right? Is that you have to put yourself in your interlocutor's shoes and in your interlocutor's mind. You have to reason the way they reason. And the strongest thing to do in a debate is to take their position and attempt to defend it.
Exactly. And
when you totally don't agree.
Yeah, you really, I think people probably write characters in different ways. Some people calculate them, I'm sure, but I can't. I have to inhabit them, and then they just sort of speak through me. So, if I'm writing whatever, a terrorist or a serial killer, I become, that killer or that, person who hates America for the time that I'm writing from that character's point of view. And to me, that makes them feel real, And
that's like an actor. I said Heath Ledger before, like with, Joker, and look at what, the effects that it had. That's the creative risk almost of that could be a slippery slope, putting yourself in someone's shoes to the point of thinking how they think. And then when you're an author or a creative, you got to make villains. So you have to do the same for villains who are people you probably personally completely would disagree with. You have to find what makes them human. You have to find what motivates them. And I think that what that makes a strong villain is someone you can understand. And in this book, we have a clash of villain and hero, the two elites, and they have a very interesting conversation towards the end of the book. So maybe one more thing we'll put on the spoiler chat for the next episode once the book comes out. But you've loved writing villains. I actually found this quote you put on your blog for Rising Phoenix. You were thinking back and reflecting back on your first book you ever wrote. And you said, you can see the beginnings of what has evolved into my writing style. Moral ambiguity, conventional heroes, a fascination with villains, and a passion for realism. I think those are the big four things that make a Kyle Mills book a Kyle Mills book.
I think absolutely they are. And it was really funny because all that moral ambiguity I had to put aside, for the Mitch Rapp stuff, because it's very different.
It's black and white.
Yeah, it's really good guy, bad guy.
Right.
To me, they're never good guy, bad guy thing. Even if you think about the villain in this book and he's kind of spewing his manifesto, every once in a while you think, he's got a little point there.
Yep.
And I love that in a villain, like a very clever villain who I almost kind of want you to be able to see from his point of view.
Sure.
Where you think, well, I can understand. I mean, what he's doing is wrong, is terrible and everything like this, and he must be stopped. But he's coming at it from from an angle that I can see why he was motivated to do that. I
Right.
don't like really flat kind of why are you bad? I mean, people have done it well, like Hannibal Lecter. Why are you bad? Because
Mm.
I was born that way.
Right, right.
But and you could do that, but to me, I want to know what makes that character do the things they do.
Yeah.
And villains are just fun, right?
And I think you also have the effects of that on the people around them with a number of other side villains or mini villains who, when we actually capture them or when we're interrogating them or hearing their side of the story, you realize maybe they didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they went along because they're forced to go along with it. And you even reveal the humanity of the people who propped up that villain, who helped the big bad become the big bad. And they even have their humanity shine through when we encounter them.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people get sucked into into the orbit of these people who are very charismatic, but very destructive. And maybe they're blinded to the big picture, to what they're doing. And in this book, it's very much about the big picture. And John Lowe, who's struggling with his own humanity. And that's why Fade becomes such a pivotal character in this, because while Fade is, you could describe him maybe as an unrepentant mass murderer and et cetera, et cetera. He has a great deal of humanity,
Yeah.
and that John Lowe almost is attracted to like a moth, because
Sure.
Fade, while he's done terrible things, has a moral compass that's very steady.
He does. Yeah. I
And
think
he's
that makes
not
him so
sure he's
interesting.
doing the right thing, but he tries.
But that's what's so interesting is because we're in this character's head who is so dark, who is the ultimate pessimist, one could say, yet he just finds this silver lining in people and their situations. And maybe because he's been there and he's hit the lowest of lows, and he's constantly living the lowest of lows.
Yeah.
And I think that gives him this, it's wild to say, but it gives him this, he sees this grace in people and in creation, even though he desperately kind of hates it at the same time. He hates existence even. He hates the fact that he's alive. Yet he, like you said, he finds that moral compass and he's true to it no matter what. And he almost wants to help other people more than he wants to help himself. And that drive, I think, is what heals him or will heal him. I feel like he's not done. His arc is not complete. I said healing and chaos. There's still chaos and there's still healing to be done. But
he's a
come
work in
long way.
progress. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, early on, he has a relationship with a woman. It's not a relationship, but they're not to be a spoiler, but they're working together, and
Yeah.
she ends up in kind of a bind, and he's basically sees her as this person that's good, that wants to help people, and maybe that he admires, and he wants to live up to that, and he's thinking, if she exists in the world, maybe it's not all bad, and then there's nothing he won't do to protect her. And at some point makes the point that basically if anything ever happens to her, he's going to kill everybody that was involved, their families, everybody they've ever met, and because she's like this shining light to him, and I think that's what he's looking for. And, hopefully as the series develops, maybe he'll find. And even John Lowe, he's attracted to because the guy's so fascinating, but also because, the guy seems to want to do the right thing, but like Fade, he's not 100% sure what the right thing is. And that's the world we live in, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what's right? What side should you be on? I don't know. I wonder every morning.
But that's perhaps the biggest commonality with Mitch Rapp. And I bet this part of writing the two characters aligned as much does not align about trying to write and craft and think like these two heroes and protagonists. I think what aligns is that loyalty. And if you don't know right from wrong, if the world doesn't seem to know right from wrong, and even if there is chaos, what's always the one true path is loyalty and honesty. And I feel like they're both brutally loyal and brutally honest to the people that matter to them. So
Yeah, and this is something that really comes from the military tradition. You talk
right,
about, you talk to guys who've, been downrange for a lot of their careers, and that's the theme. It's very much like, well, what about the big picture and should we have attacked this country or whatever? They're like, I got my mates, and we're going to survive. And it's
right.
100% about that every day.
Yep.
And that's Fade. I mean, former SEAL, like it's him, it's the people he loves. And he finds the things to cling to that keep him alive, because like you said, otherwise he's pretty indifferent to, like, he's died a couple of times. He's been clinically dead a couple of times, more than a couple. And he always comes back, and he's always found that death was pretty attractive.
He's
Like,
disappointed. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't bother him at all. He likes it. The darkness.
That's too funny. Well, since we want to jump into a spoiler section, just to wrap this up, for anybody who heard this and has not yet pre-ordered the book, make sure you go ahead. And there's even a couple of special nuggets. I heard you announce an alternate ending if you pre-order through certain booksellers that are on your website. Can you tell us
Yep.
how that came to
Yeah.
fruition?
So there's some indies on my website, and if you order from them, they will stick my alternate ending to the book in there. And so you can read the other idea I had for the end of it.
Were these two competing ideas? Is it you
Not
had to
really.
put it on the cutting room floor?
The other one was not a great beginning to a series. So it probably would not have worked in the book. But it's fun, and it's something I thought about a lot. When they said that, oh, would you can you come up with an alternate ending? I was like, oh yeah, I already have it.
Oh, I got that.
It's like 10 minutes.
This is Kyle Mills we're talking to.
And the other one is the audiobook.
Right.
There's a bonus feature in that one, and it's me in conversation with the guy who did the audio, which was super fun. And I had asked to do that. He's a really cool guy, but also because, like, never knew how that sausage was made.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting, like how these guys do it and how they come up with all the characters and do all this stuff. And his name's Will Dameron, and he's really, really, really engaging, and he's great. Because it's interesting that when you do those with the Mitch Rapp stuff, I never, George Goodall did it, and he's amazing.
It was George. Yeah.
But this one, it was like, you can have anybody, anything. So we did all these auditions, and they were all really different. It was super fun to listen to how people interpreted that character.
Did you have full choice?
Yeah. And then, well, I mean, we were talking with we were all like doing ballots, right?
Got you.
And we all really, most of us came down on this guy's either being first or second. And when he spoke, I was like, okay, now I hear that character.
You heard Fade.
Anyway, if you get the audio, you get this, and he tells you, I got to ask him every question I'd ever wanted. Wow. Like, do you sit in your closet? All these, and so it's super fun.
That's so interesting. I didn't plan on owning 3 versions of this book. I got the advanced one, need the hardcover, and now I also need the audiobook because of that extra chapter.
Super interesting.
We're huge audiobook fans on the podcast. 9 out of 10 books that we cover on the pod, both Chris and I listen to on the audiobook. So we have a lot of opinions and takes on narration. And
I remember you guys, you assholes read or listened to the Fade abridged audiobook.
Yes.
Because it's all there was.
Wait, what is with that? Yeah, we all can only find a 4.5-hour abridged version.
Yeah.
Once we read the book, our opinion changed completely on Fade.
You guys are too young to remember that audio used to be heavily abridged. So it was only about a third of the book.
Because the cassettes, you can't have 8, 9, 10 cassettes.
You can't have like cassettes like this stacked up your entire back seat, right?
No, I checked those out of the library when I was in elementary school, so I do remember the cassettes, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
Interesting.
So,
So there
so
was no
what?
full audiobook of Fade 1?
I
Or
don't
was
think
it
there was ever.
it
I don't
wasn't
even
even
think books
recorded?
on. Maybe Books on Tape did it, which is
Okay,
who used to do the unabridged audiobooks.
sure.
But I don't think so. I don't think they ever did Fade. So we
Because
had just had the abridged.
we scoured the internet
Yeah,
looking
I don't think it
for the full
exists.
audiobook, and I don't think if anybody, any one of our listeners has some Fade cassette tapes, we will get them digitally recorded and definitely listen to the full Fade one on audiobook. But that's
Yeah,
great to hear about Will Dameron. I hadn't heard any of his work, but I've heard he's done a Michael Connelly book, Carl Hyacin, hundreds of others, and has a great website. I was doing some research, so I'm
yeah.
very excited. Just
He's
curious
great, a
about
writer in himself and actor,
actor.
and yeah,
Yeah,
it's such a
actually,
cool thing because I can't imagine doing it.
right.
Like trying to read one of my books and do all the characters and everything and the accents. Poor guy made him do cartoon characters for God's sakes. He had to do like Yosemite Sam, Daffy Duck, and like Marvin the Martian.
Well, speaking of my childhood in the 90s, you bring up a lot of a pop fiction, whether it's cartoons, like you mentioned, there's even a Charlotte's Web reference. Like these are the things running through Fade's mind. That's got to be a tough haul for a narrator. But we actually had George Goodell on the podcast. He doesn't do many interviews.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were
I,
real
don't- I
lucky
haven't
that
heard that one.
we had him on the Mitch Rapp podcast. The very, very ironic thing is his audio wasn't great on the recording. So perhaps the most well-known audiobook recorder in the universe, we get on with him, and I think he's talking into a phone that may or may not also have been from the 1990s. So we did scrub the audio best we could, and he had some really insightful things. But yeah, he told us he fixed the windows up at his house and got this whole recording studio and actually had part of it in a closet for the acoustics and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear from Will what the recording world is like now. But George had the one thing I remember George saying that really stuck with me was he doesn't like being called a voice actor because he's an actor and it has to be a full body kind of get into character. You're not just manipulating your voice, you're reading as if you are a person, full person. So you have to be a full actor and not just a voice actor. And I thought that was very insightful. I'm sure Will would have similar feelings about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. So for all those audiobook aficionados, you'll get that bonus,
Great.
which is definitely go past the end and listen to it because it's super fun.
Sure. And last thing about the coming release, Fade Nation has been a lot of fun. You have a mini ambassador program and a lot of influencers out there. I mean, Twitter and all the social medias have been all over Fade since these copies came out. Seems like you
Yeah,
took a
which
page
is
out of the Mystery Bus's playbook.
yeah, because and it's super fun because I mean, it felt a little bit like when I wrote The Survivor, the first
Mm.
Mitch Rapp book, because they decided that they were going to do that program, which was funny because like they didn't announce it until they read the book. Because I think they were like, "Oh, if the Survivor sucks, we won't do it." And so they decided it was, it was good. And then they went out and did this program, but I had no idea what the reaction would be because, it's the first Mitch Rapp book not written by Vince. And so it was really nerve wracking. And then it's kind of the same thing here. We've got this character that's very different than Mitch, but a similar vein. And how are people going to react to it? I mean, like I very much like The Survivor. I thought, well, maybe everybody will hate it. I mean, I have no idea. And so I really loved it and
Yeah.
been super positive, which is great because, man, I'll tell you sweat a little bit when you send those things out,
Yeah.
particularly to a lot of fans of Mitch Rapp. And,
Mm.
you're like, well, this is a very different kind of character, different kind of challenges. Are they going to like it?
Yeah, I get that. But Fade Nation is, they got your back. Fade Nation is standing by. I feel like could be called the Kyle Mills, it's like Kyle Mills cult.
It's
Kyle
great. I
Mills
mean,
fan club.
my fans have been with me forever. I mean, since, I've been doing this for almost 30 years and Vince's have been amazing, in their acceptance of me, in their willingness to follow me into my next adventure. And it's really been great. I mean, it was such a blessing to be able to do that and connect with all those people.
That's great. Well, Kyle, congrats on Fade In after a 20-year journey to resurrect Fade, literally and figuratively, because Fade is back. And I'm glad you mentioned there will be more Fade to come. This will be a continuing series. And he's definitely one of, if not, the quirkiest character I've ever read in a thriller. So hats off. Well done.
Good. Thank you.
Got to thank our patrons, including our special deputy director, Sherry F., our special operator, Jason C., our special agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Peggy, Mark, and Chris. Subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits. You can find us at thriller.pod.com or on Twitter and Instagram